Chapter 67, The Trespasser, Hanyu's POV. It wasn't until Hanyu was down the stairs and flying down the hall that he thought to wonder whether he'd be able to recognize Lord Marcus's door. He couldn't ask Felix. The war god was already gone, which was good because he probably would have tried to stop Hanyu, and that just wasn't acceptable. He had to see Asao now. He hadn't needed to worry. When he turned a corner, there was the wall he'd cowered against as Lord Marcus loomed over him. He recognized it instantly. Just as quickly, he saw the door the god had emerged from. It was only a blur through the tears that had burned his eyes and scalded his cheeks, but Hanyu had no doubts that it was the right room. His heart battered at his ribs. His breath came in gasps. All he could think was a steady stream of, "Please, please, 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 please." He shoved the door open and tumbled into an unfamiliar room. It seemed larger than Antony's sitting room, but Hanyu realized that was just because there was no table. 2 chairs served as the only furniture, and lovely tapestries and carvings decorated the walls. None of this splendor, however, was what Hanyu was looking for. "Asao!" he cried, voice cracking. It seemed like he waited there forever, staring wildly about the tidy room for any sign of violence or struggle. In reality, it was probably only a moment later that he heard a voice from the bedchamber. "Who's there?" The voice was a rasp, a croak, hardly more than a whisper, but Hanyu seized on it with his whole heart as he barreled through the door to the bedchamber. Asao was untangling himself from a blanket on the floor next to the bed. He looked pale and scared and pissed, but he was alive. Hanyu flung himself to the floor beside him with a grateful sob. Remembering all the times he'd caused Asao to flinch with his reckless affection, Hanyu barely stopped himself from pulling him into his arms, and instead contented himself with pressing his forehead to his friend's sweaty brow. "Oh, gods," he blubbered. "You're all right! Oh, gods, fuck! I was so scared! Oh, Asao!" Asao's body stayed rigid, and his voice was just as hoarse now that Hanyu was closer. "What are you doing here? Please tell me you didn't just burst in." "Of course I did!" Hanyu had to fight to keep from clutching him. "No one knew where you were, and Kenta said he heard screaming." "Oh, that." The dismissive note in Asao's voice was sufficiently startling to slow the flood of Hanyu's happy tears. "Yes, I was screaming, but I'm all right. My lord likes it when I scream. Nothing bad was happening." "Then why weren't you above deck for exercises?" Hanyu demanded. Asao shrugged his shoulders, which felt bonier under Hanyu's hands than they used to. "I didn't feel like it. My master drank from me last night, and I served in his bed afterwards, and then there was a storm, so I didn't get to sleep much. Listen, Hanyu, you need to get out of here." "Oh." As the rapture of his relief faded, Hanyu was beginning to feel a little foolish. Still, "Are you sick?" "I don't think so. Why do you ask?" Hanyu gestured to his own throat. "Your voice is so rough. I could get you some tea or broth or—" Asao's bark of hoarse laughter cut off his list of suggestions, and Hanyu subsided, bewildered. "Oh, gods," Asao gasped. "Come on, Hanyu, you're not a child anymore. Or at least, you're not supposed to be." There it was again, that new hard edge to his voice that could almost be cruelty. Hanyu shrunk back a little, but he kept his grip on his friend's shoulders. He couldn't help feeling that if he let go, he might never really touch Asao again. "Well, you know me," he said, forcing lightness. "Stupid Hanyu. Help me out, will you?" Asao had always argued when he called himself stupid. He never tried to make the case that Hanyu wasn't stupid, of course, only that he shouldn't say it. Hanyu waited tremulously for the familiar declarations. "Don't talk about my best friend like that." Instead, Asao just sighed wearily. "Oh, come on! Lord Marcus used my throat. Couldn't you guess as much?" Yes, Hanyu supposed he could have, except... But then, how were you screaming? He should have controlled his damn mouth, shouldn't have asked the question, because he knew down to the ends of his toes that he wouldn't like the answer. But it was too late now. Asao was looking down at the floor, avoiding his gaze, his pale cheeks flushing weakly. "That was after. I wasn't pleasing, and my master disciplined me, as is his right. But Hanyu, you need to go. I don't know how long Lord Marcus will be gone, and you can't be here when he gets back. Hanyu, are you listening to me?" There were fresh bruises on his neck, Hanyu noticed dully, peppered liberally over the older marks he'd seen before. Tears sprang to Hanyu's eyes at the thought of anybody using his Asau so roughly. It didn't matter that he was Lord Marcus's Asau now, and the god could do as he pleased with what was his. Just because he could didn't mean he should. Asau was not meant to be treated this way. It was probably a blasphemous thought. Asau belonged to Lord Marcus, and his treatment was entirely up to the god. But Hanyu couldn't shake the feeling that this treatment was making Asau weak and frightened and vicious, and so how could it be right? Perhaps if Lord Marcus had someone like Hanyu, it would have made sense. Hanyu wasn't a good attendant. He would have deserved the constant strict discipline. But Asau was the best, so it was totally pointless to punish and frighten him. For what must have been the 100th time, Hanyu had the uneasy feeling that there had been a mix-up. Asau had been meant for Lord Antony. He should have had a master who treated him gently and put him at ease and acted as though his feelings mattered. If anyone should have had a master who could keep him in line, it was Hanyu. But Hanyu had Antony, and Asau... Hanyu tried to make his voice firm. "We should talk to Lord Antony. He'll make Lord Marcus treat you more gently." "Don't you fucking dare!" The hoarseness of Asau's voice did little to mask his fury as he spat the words in Hanyu's face. For his part, Hanyu flinched back, finally relinquishing his hold on Asau's shoulders in the face of this sudden venom. "It's not enough for you that he chose you over me," the smaller man hissed, eyes wild. "Do you have to parade my inadequacies in front of him too? Do you really hate me that much?" Hanyu's voice came out weak with misery. "Hate you? No, Asau, no, I love you." Asau carried on as though he hadn't opened his mouth. "I know I was proud at the temple. I thought I was worthy to serve at any god's feet. But if you want to put me in my place, Hanyu, I assure you I've been put there. I know what I am. I know what I'm good for. You don't have to rub it in my face." "I just want to help," Hanyu cried. "I don't want your help." The ferocity in Asau's snarl seemed to shock even him, and he fell silent. Hanyu knelt in a huddle, barely restraining sobs and curling around in icy pain and fear that were unlike anything he'd ever felt before. Asau is in danger. Asau isn't himself. Asau hates me. Asau is getting hurt. As the thoughts churned nonsensically through his mind, the full force of Hanyu's helplessness finally became clear. It was bad enough when he couldn't interfere because of who Lord Marcus was, Asau's master and a god besides. But now he was being forbidden to interfere because of who he was. Not Asau's friend, not his dearest companion, but a scheming enemy who had stolen all of Asau's chances at a better life. "So," observed some remote part of his brain, "this is what it feels like when your heart breaks." Hanyu, I'm sorry." Asau sounded hesitant and subdued, but Hanyu still didn't dare to meet his eyes. "I didn't mean that how it sounded. But listen, you really do need to get out of here. I don't want my master to—" "Asau?" The angry voice boomed from the sitting room, drowning whatever else he might have said. "Did you leave the door open?" Asau's pale face turned even paler, and he pressed his trembling hands to his mouth. For his part, Hanyu fell all at once as if his head were floating, that voice snapping every cord that bound him to his suddenly icy body. Oh no. Lord Marcus stomped through the bedroom door, then stopped short as his big dark eyes fixed on Hanyu. "Oh," was all the god said. Asau let out a soft moan and fell on his face, which reminded Hanyu to make his own bow beside him. "Please, my lord, it's all my fault," Asau whimpered. How many times had Asau said that to one priest or another? How many times had he taken the scoldings and punishments Hanyu had earned? How many times was Hanyu's recklessness going to harm this man, whose only mistake had always been keeping him for a friend? "He tried to tell me to go. Why didn't I listen for once in my life?" Asau was still speaking. "Please send him away and punish me as you see fit. It's my fault. Please, please." Now, my dear, where are your manners?" Hanyu's eyes were tightly shut and his face pressed into the carpet, but he could hear the slow smile dripping from Lord Marcus's voice. "I would have thought you were a better host than that. That's no way to make our guest feel welcome." Antony had been wrong about him, Hanyu realized through a dizzy rush of terror. He was so stupid.